At first glance, Pokemon seems like a pretty tame universe, but that couldn't be further from the truth. We've seen time and time again Pokemon tackle some pretty complex issues, and the concept of war has definitely been one of them. And one of the regions we know the most about its history is the Kalos region, which directly tells the player that there was a war. But for us to understand this story, we have to go back thousands of years from the current Pokemon timeline to one of the most deadliest wars in the series, the Great Kalos War. We start off with the king named AZ, which you may be able to recognize from the Pokemon X and Y games, and he's the king of what we can presume to be the Kalos region 3,000 years ago. Back then, AZ was so advanced he was able to create a machine that could restore life. With his newfound invention, he was able to bring peace to the Kalos region for the very first time ever, uniting everybody. And Kalos managed to become one of the most prosperable regions, being able to get ahead of every other region back then, which started scaring some people. We don't exactly know who the people were that were in charge of the regions back then, since a lot of this is a mystery, but what we do know for sure is that in Pokemon X and Y in Lysander's labs, his records account that the worlds were getting scared of Kalos' wealth. Since the fear of the unknown scares a lot of people, and since Kalos had a machine that was able to bring things back from the dead, it started scaring a lot of people on how it could be weaponized against them. So ever since then, a great war began against the Kalos region. We don't know the exact region that attacked Kalos, and there are many theories online saying that it is Galar, but I want to stick to the content that we know for sure. So I'm not saying that it wasn't Galar that was attacking Kalos, but we'll probably get a lot of these answers in the new Pokemon Legends ZA game, since it's taking place in the past of the Kalos region with all this rich lore. The state of the war started getting bad though, and the king started drafting out Pokemon to fight the war for them. And you may be thinking, why didn't they just use powerful Pokemon trainers to fight the war? But back then, from our understanding, there were no such things as a Pokemon trainer, which we will cover more deeply later. The great Pokemon draft got so bad and Kalos was losing a lot of their Pokemon that the king had to even send in his own Pokemon, AZ's beloved Flowette. While this was all going on, AZ had a brother that was scheming in the back. Lysander's records actually bring this to our attention, and it reads, AZ had a younger brother. It is said that he had a legion of greedy souls who wanted to seize the Kalos region. His dark intention was to make it his own. But when he saw Kalos has been ravaged by war, he took the weapon his brother had created and buried the weapon deep underground. So it looks like we have Kalos fighting an external war against a bunch of Pokemon regions and an internal one where AZ's own brother is hiding their ultimate weapon from him. But during the midst of the war, AZ's brother actually died and only told his legion on where he hid the weapon, and AZ's brother said that this is something to be used by sophisticated powers and not by humans, and human beings shall only create a weapon like this unless it's absolutely necessary. Thanks to the Pokemon Generations anime, in episode 18 we actually see the details of what happened to AZ's Flowette. This Pokemon fought a very hard battle, but considering all the Pokemon it was up against, it ended up dying in the Pokemon War, and AZ got delivered the casket of Flowette's body. And this made AZ crash out. And AZ wanted to do anything to bring Flowette back to life, so he did. He ended up rebuilding a machine to be able to bring Pokemon back to life. And when he finally completed this machine, he used it on the Flowette. And it worked. Flowette came back to life, but it looks a little different, taking on a new form we call the Eternal Flowette form. And this form of a Pokemon has actually never been obtainable in the game, and it knows an exclusive move called Light of Rune, which is the strongest fairy type attacking move, excluding like Z moves and all those shenanigans. Even though everything seemed fine and AZ was able to do what he wanted, revive his favorite Pokemon, he had so much rage building up in his heart he didn't care anymore. In Lysander's books, AZ says, "What's wrong with bringing something you love back into the world? Without my beloved Pokemon, no other Pokemon have any meaning." And AZ took this literally, because a weapon that he made that was used for peace and bringing people together and reviving Pokemon, he started using it for mass destruction, making sure everyone felt what he felt long ago. AZ caused so much destruction that he single-handedly ended the war with his machine, just blowing up everything in his path. And Flowette really couldn't stand for this. Flowette knew that the reason why she's alive right now costed many Pokemon's lives, and it just doesn't feel right seeing the ones innocent AZ turned into such a tyrant. So Floette left AZ and disappeared because it just couldn't handle all of this, and AZ was devastated. He didn't know what to do, and from our story perspective, he also disappeared for 3,000 years. The only other time we end up seeing AZ in the Pokemon canon is when the protagonist of the X and Y series becomes champion, and AZ approaches him asking him to have a Pokemon battle since he wants to feel what a Pokemon battle's like. Due to the fact that AZ told the champion that he wants to have a Pokemon battle for the first time, we can infer that all the way back then when the war was going on that there were no such thing as Pokemon trainers, and Pokemon and humans just lived side by side, and the Pokemon just aided the humans in their own war. After the champion ends up defeating AZ, he repents for making the weapon of mass destruction, and Floette descends from the sky to 3,000 years later still alive, and AZ ends up crying since he saw his Pokemon again. And for now, that's where AZ's story ends, and I strongly believe that we're going to get a lot of answers between what happened in the 3,000 years and the war in Pokemon Legends ZA. But there have still been more wars, and one of them happened in Unova. This one is a lot more recent than the Kalos War, and it's a story between two twin brothers. Basically, Unova was created by the people being united over a single powerful dragon that was hosted by two twin heroes. Even with peace being made through these dragons, the two brothers ended up fighting over their beliefs and ideals, and the dragon ended up splitting up, with Reshiram going with the older brother and Zekrom going with the younger brother. They ended up having a long battle over these ideals, causing a major fire which burnt down Unova. And we know the Sacred Sword Trio ended up stepping in and saving people using their powers, but that's kind of all we know about the Unova War. We do know that the Sacred Sword Trio is responsible for ending the Unova War, and at the end of the war they ended up finding Keldeo, adding him onto the team. It was heavily theorized that when Pokemon Black and White 2 come out, we were going to see the original dragon of the Unova region that was once Zekrom and Reshiram, but we never ended up seeing it, and we've only seen a fused version with Zekrom and Reshiram with Kyurem. But despite all this, there is still one major thing you probably want me to tackle: the Great Pokemon War that took place in the Kanto region, the thing that started it all. Basically, in the Kanto region, when you go up to Lieutenant Surge, he lets you know that he participated in the Great Pokemon War. And many people have theorized that this war was between Kanto and the Johto region. And I mean, for a bit, this seemed pretty plausible. In the Kanto region, when you play the games, there are literally barely any adults around, and that would probably be because all the adults got drafted into war, just like Lieutenant Surge said. But unfortunately, this is all just fan theories. We honestly know nothing about the Great Pokemon War. The YouTuber Dragonae pointed this out very well in his own videos, that we have very little evidence that this war between Kanto and Johto even existed. One of the only canon things that even links Johto to a war with Kanto is the Tower of Ecruteak City, which is the tower that burnt down in the Johto region and created the legendary dogs. But the continuity on this tower is so bizarre that we can't even use it as a reliable source. Since this story ends up being different between the games, Pokemon Generations, the anime, we don't have a set time on what exactly happened at Ecruteak City. Some versions say it happened during a war, some versions say that Lugia stopped a battle and burnt the tower down itself, and other people just think it was an accident from burglars burning it down. So we really can't use this event as a reliable source to link any war. But even with the evidence stacked against it, the one thing that is true is that the legendary dogs were created from whatever accident happened here, and the people were so scared of these legendary Pokemon they started abusing them and mistreating them. Suicune and the legendary dogs ended up abandoning humanity because they didn't want to be around people that hated them. So in the end, did a Kanto War really happen? Maybe, I don't know, it really just depends if Game Freak wants to touch on it, but I highly doubt they're ever going to bring this specific war to light, since we actually have way more canon wars that are cemented in their story, and with the release of Legends ZA coming soon, we're probably going to have to make an update video on this. So stick around, subscribe, and click one of the two videos on your screen right now to get more Pokemon lore.